Good Wednesday evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Carolinas Weather Group, and we are happy to have you on this first day of fall. I know all this summer is over now. It's time for football and pumpkins and bonfires and all that good stuff. It doesn't feel like fall, especially here today. We're up in the upper 70s, low 80s, so a nice little treat there. And a lot of outdoor activities taking place in the fall time as well as the summertime. And tonight, that's kind of our topic we're going to be talking about is weather safety and outdoor events. And we've got on Rob Dale, who was a broadcast meteorologist at one time and who has turned into an emergency manager. He is very equipped with how to make safety plans, how to make events safe, and he has a lot of hands-on stuff with this. So we're looking forward to having him on tonight, kind of talking to him about what we should do to prepare if you are a Little League, baseball, or football, or if you are a director of a festival or a carnival, something like that. Hopefully you'll get some tips tonight as we talk about this important subject. So before we do that, I will go over a few things. This is a live podcast, podcast and broadcast. So if you have any questions for us, please feel free to send them via Twitter or Facebook. We also have a question and answer tab that you can use. Also, if you're listening to this on the rebroadcast, if you're watching YouTube or our podcast and you have a question, then please feel free to shoot them to us then, or you could do Rob as well. So that way you can get the answers from him. I think that's about it. So we'll pass it around to the panel right quick. I know here in the North Carolina, South Carolina area, we're very excited. We've been in this drought all summer long. It does look like we're going to get some substantial rainfall in here for the next few days. So maybe we can hit on that a little bit before we start the show. I'm going to pass it off to Kit, who is down at UNC Charlotte, and he can tell you how his week's been down there in the Queen City.
Well, thank you, Scotty. On Monday in the Queen City, we got about a third of an inch of rain. It came in right after I got out of one of my club meetings, so I made it back to my car, no rain on my head, so that was nice. But I've been tracking this rain that Scotty's talking about coming up at the end of this week since about last Friday. I saw it on one of the models. There was a closed low forming, looked at a few previous models, and it was all over the place. I was like, oh, it's not going to happen. Well, lo and behold, it's still holding true. It's looking like it's going to affect the coast and the mountains more so than the Piedmont, where I would really like it. But that's about all weather-wise that's going on. I don't know how it's going to affect the mountains of Virginia and Tennessee, but maybe Ricky could talk about what he's been seeing with this low system moving through. Ricky?
Ricky has to unmute his mic, but now it works. Hey, yeah, we are kind of expecting a little bit of rainfall up here, but not a whole lot. We're looking at kind of the upslope and the downslope. I'm in the Tri-Cities region. That's Bristol, Kingsport, and Johnson City, Tennessee, and we cover Southwest Virginia and Northeast Tennessee. And so we're not expecting a whole lot of rain. We saw the WPC outlook, and it had a nice 2 or 3 inch swath across some of our eastern counties, Carter and over towards portions of Washington counties. But I was like, not sure how that's going to work out with some of the downslope that comes in off the mountain. So I guess we'll see as we go into Friday and Saturday and see if we have an interesting time. But I think folks like Joey and Scotty probably will end up having the most rainfall with the upslope in eastern or western North Carolina, that is.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that upslope. Seen some totals 3 to 4 inches of rain, and for our area, I think we've only received 65 or 66% of the rainfall to date, year to date. So we are really looking forward to having some of that rain. Before we introduce our guest tonight, I'm going to pass it down to Joey, who is kind of a late comer. So Joey, how have you been, and how's the weather there in central North Carolina?
Man, the weather here is, my window's open. That's my weather. That's my weather forecast. Is my window is open, and I'm excited. But yeah, I'm actually on Jacob's account tonight. Apparently, I had to redo my computer and update operating systems, and I haven't been on here except he was on here playing on it. And lo and behold, whenever I logged into the Hangout, I'm apparently a 9-year-old tonight. So, that's about all I have. I won't be able to hang on for the whole time, but I want to come on for a few minutes because this topic, as you guys know, I've been very, very vocal about our planning for outdoor events in relation to severe weather and things like that. So I want to at least be able to jump on for the first, at least 15, 20 minutes of the show. So carry on, get into the show. I want to hear it.
All right, that sounds good. I'm going to give it over to Ricky Matthews, who will conduct our interview. Ricky?
All right, sounds good. Yeah. Joey kind of just jumped on here to throw a little rant in, and I guess he's going to run away as soon as he says something controversial. So, Rob, be mindful of what he says here for a few minutes. Tonight we are welcoming Rob Dale, right, onto our show. Excuse me. I had to go pull to Twitter. Rob Dale onto our show, who's going to talk a little bit about events and emergency management and kind of how they all play together and really how the weather can impact significantly some of these events, and we'll look back a little bit on the past events that we've had too. So Rob, welcome. Why don't you go ahead and start off telling us just a little bit about what you're involved in, kind of your role in your current day-to-day operations and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm a Purdue man. Went back to Purdue for atmospheric sciences and spent 12 years on TV. I was 2 in my hometown of Toledo and 10 up here. I'm in Lansing, Michigan now. I left it in 2009 for lots of reasons, but figured at some point TV meteorology was not going to work for me anymore, so might as well change before I do it. I've worked with emergency management for years. I'm in weather, obviously, because of my passion for weather. I know there are some that kind of do it for TV, but I really like the weather. And so every time we get a big storm, I'd show up the next day without a camera. I just wanted to see what happened and met a lot of the emergency managers and really didn't know a whole lot about emergency management until doing that. So kind of got integrated with them and kind of enjoyed the aspects that they looked at. A lot of disaster-related stuff is weather-related. There's some, other things that are on the side, but most of our incidents are weather-related. So I went back to school, got my bachelor's and just now my master's in emergency management and took this in the field. So what I do now, basically for years, the only reason events called me for weather was to come out and sit next to their rain gauge and watch their rain gauge because their insurance provider said if it rained over a certain amount, they would get all their money back or something along those lines. And honestly, I still have clients that's all they want. They want me to come out and watch their rain gauge. And I'll do it because it's pretty easy money. But what we're trying to push out is that there's much more to what emergency management can do for event planning than just watch rain gauges. And so one of the things we do is try to educate these event venues and planners on not just weather safety, but safety in general, making sure they have plans in case they have to evacuate, whether it's from weather or it's from a chlorine tank nearby comes to a leak and you have to evacuate 5,000 people. It's not easily done. So we do our best to work with them and to make sure that they have plans for that kind of event. We do, if it's a larger event, we may support it in person. We had a big race just last Saturday with the storms in the forecast, or a marathon, half marathon. So I went down and I supported it on site, and we watched the radar together, and they had their apps, and everyone looked at their little app, and they could see that it was going to rain, and that's about all they could tell us. And here I was plotting, using Wonderground actually to plot local weather stations because there's no ASOS nearby, and we watched the cold front bring some gusts of 40 miles per hour, so we brought down the rock wall. And without that, if they were just looking at their apps, the rock wall would have stood up there, and that's a big deal for us. So really, my role is to educate and hope that we get people to bring us in, and in some aspects it works a little bit better.
Comment a little bit more, if you can, on the whole rain gauge thing, because I know a few people who have done that, to where, is that a big industry? What's the whole deal with insurance companies paying them back like that?
Don't know where it started from, but that's what, when an event takes insurance, I do it with it's the Hillsdale County Fair, which is one of the oldest fairs in the nation, actually. They're in the southern part of the state, but every year they have a big night of concert. They have it's a small venue, but they'll bring in some big names, and they take weather insurance policy out. And so if it rains, I think the cutoff is a quarter inch. If it rains a quarter inch in that 5-hour time block, then they get their entire investment back. The thinking is that people won't come to it in the rain. There's no qualifications for lightning, for heavy winds, for tornadoes. So If they're down there and they close the venue because there's a tornado warning, they don't get a penny back. If they close it because there's high winds coming in, they don't get a penny back. They only get their money if there's a quarter inch of rain in that rain bucket. So every hour I come back, I record that there's nothing in the rain bucket or whatever, and then that's what it is. I've done it for our the Lansing Symphony, same topic. They put a rain gauge out in the outfield, and once an hour I come check it and log it in a book, and I don't know where it came from, but until insurance companies change that, I think that's one of the big issues. Is there's no incentive for the venue operator to shut down his operation because I tell him you're going to see 60-mile-per-hour winds. Because if the winds come through and it's a gust front, Indiana State Fair, for example, that was a gust front that hit him. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the main part of the storm. So had the storm missed him, it would have not have rained in the bucket, and they would not have received any money for shutting it down. So I don't know how much that played in that particular incident, but I know in the grand scheme of how it works, venue operators are not going to shut it down if their insurance is not going to cover that.
First off, can we have you turn your camera off if possible? We're having a few audio issues, and sometimes it's related to bandwidth. All right, so we'll see if that helps it a little bit here.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. We're just trying to minimize a few things that we've learned over time here.
I understand.
We talked a little bit about how it seems like rain is the one thing that kind of gets events to stop, and it's interesting because I remember Marshall Shepard tweeting about this last time we had an event where you could see the lightning, but nobody in the stands of the football game was moving because it wasn't raining. But once it started raining, everyone left, and it's interesting to see that that's kind of the basis a lot of these companies or insurance companies use. Instead of adverse weather, it's rainfall.
Yes, and I really don't know what the way to attack that is. Insurers, they do what they do because they want to make money at the end of the day. I mean, they're not out there as a public service. So if they started offering up, insurance for 60-mile-per-hour winds, maybe they lose more money. And I'm not saying that's why they're not doing it, but that's the standard. I've never seen any kind of insurance coverage that deals with that. When you talk about stadiums, certain, NCAA Division I, it's a requirement to evacuate for lightning as it becomes within a certain range. So that makes it easier because there's no wiggle room. There's not supposed to be. The unfortunate part about that is there's no punishment if you don't do it. I mean, there's nothing that says the NCAA is going to come in and take away your Division I status. I don't know what the ramifications are for not doing it, but it's sad, but it does take those kind of rules and requirements to force some venue operators to be able to do what they need to do.
Rob, monitoring Twitter here, one of our loyal followers, Andrea Melvin, was talking about how we need the insurance companies to include other weather hazards besides rainfall for venues and outdoor events. Do you see that maybe coming down the pipeline eventually, that insurance companies may expand outside of the rain and take into a factor of wind and lightning and other severe hazards?
I think so, but I think it's going to take another disaster is the sad part. I mean, right now there's no incentive because they're hoping it's going to miss. But it seems every year we see more stories, and I know some of that's social media because we all have Facebook now, and we all post those beautiful pictures of lightning over the Rocky Stadium as they're playing baseball. But a lot of it is we do more outdoor events than before. We have our kids. Kids are playing soccer all the time now, and I think there are more outdoor activities. And eventually those insurers are going to realize that if the venue's not going to shut down for 50-mile-per-hour winds and a 50-mile-per-hour gust come in and kill someone, well, it's going to cost them a lot more when they have to go and settle that death than had they just prevented it ahead of time and said, okay, close down, we'll give you your $10,000 back or whatever, instead of paying out $2 million for a death benefit. So I think it's eventually going to change. And just not knowing the insurance industry, I think it's going to take something bad, like Indiana State Fair again.
Now, Rob, we mentioned this earlier a little bit before the show started, but like you're saying, like it'll take a drastic bad events to really get the ball rolling on getting these things fixed. Well, my question is, like, what can we do now to prevent, like, an event happening? Like, what can we do to alert the public now so that we don't have to wait on a tragic event?
Yeah, a lot of it's education, and that comes from from a lot of sources. The Weather Service is trying hard, especially in places like Oklahoma, where they have event venue training. They teach those event managers what kind of aspects they need to consider. They don't teach them how to be meteorologists, but say, here are the things you need to consider. It can come from TV station meteorologists. I mean, there's a trust factor that some people have with their TV weather guys. That's how I started to get involved with this. It could come with groups of amateur meteorologists that maybe are able to, some people put on their own weather Skyrim type training sessions. Well, maybe a group of guys gets together and says, hey, we're going to offer this up for free to come in and just talk an hour or two to venue groups and see who shows up. It's a tough sell because these event venue managers do a lot of things in their life that don't involve weather, and so to say, hey, take out the time, here's another aspect of your job you should do because it's the right thing to do, that may not work, but it's worth an effort. We're doing a couple sessions with schools here in the next year just to teach them a little bit better on weather policies and when to. We have school districts that will close early anytime there's a tornado watch. We had our Detroit school district closed early because there was a slight risk of severe weather, and they didn't understand the hazardous weather outlook from the Weather Service office, and so they closed schools early based on an SPC slight risk. Well, it's an education effort, and that's the biggest thing, and it may be something that we can do at a grassroots level. And I hope that works. We'll continue to keep trying it up here, but it also requires it in other areas. We've tried for a couple of years now. The International Association of Emergency Managers. We proposed discussing that at the national level. It's not worked, but just this last year, I proposed bringing in a weather caucus just for IAEM, and it was approved, and I had that. So we're hoping in the next year to get that word out to emergency managers. It's something that they may not be thinking of either, especially ones that are not as involved in weather as I am. So maybe we push that effort out more through the local emergency management agency, through local fire and police. Maybe the work gets out that way at the same time.
Rob, talking about school officials, that just brings up a point. You're talking about them maybe getting out of school early for tornado watches and stuff. First of all, how do you think that process has worked for you guys? And second of all, how involved are the school systems and the community colleges and places like that? How involved are they in the weather? Do they inquire with you about what they should do? How does that process work?
Yeah, it's unfortunately it does not work as well. Some of them do. Michigan State University is hosted in here, East Lansing, so we have a great relationship with them. I support every football game. Most of them from home, but I'll just watch and provide weather support from that side. We have a community college here that's very good, but the school district, we've tried to talk to them, and the school district has never basically returned our calls. So we're going ahead with this in the spring. We're going to go ahead and put this on the session and kind of cross our fingers and hope they show up. So, and a lot of that, again, is the same story that everyone thinks, we'll just close schools early. And the problem, I don't have to worry about it. It's off my hands. We're not legally responsible, and it's hard to it's hard to convince people that think they already know because they have an app or they have no weather radio in their office and they think they're set, and it's great that they do that, but they need to take it to the next level, and I think everyone having an app is there's nothing you can do about it, but I think that's hurt the effort as well because they think they're the expert because they can look on their phone and see some colors and they look for the reds, and obviously we know it's much more than that.
Rob, I've run into this a lot with local school districts in my area. I went to Hampton City Schools. I've seen them make dumb decisions. I've seen them make semi-smart decisions, and they probably will always continue to make those, kind of a mix-up of the two, depending on the weather conditions and the challenging thing. And so it makes me wonder, and this can apply for events too, I assume, is it what, kind of draws events away from not wanting to have someone on site? Because everyone has an app for weather, but everyone's got WebMD too, but I don't run to WebMD if I'm feeling bad half the time. I, kind of call a doctor because they know a little bit more than I do. What is, this is it too costly? What's kind of keeping people away from bringing in an expert, especially in something where, and maybe you can comment on this too, the cost versus reward is maybe, outweighing one or the other.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for that right now is just availability of meteorologists to do that. I mean, your local TV meteorologist might, but he's not going to have time to do that. The Weather Service does it for the big events. For Michigan International Speedway, they come in and do it for that. But really, it's a lack. I think honestly, it's a new market to come. I know WDT does it, but they're all remote. And it's one thing to call someone on a phone, and I'm not saying they're bad at all, but it's one thing for a venue manager to call someone on a phone and say, what should I do? It's a total different factor when you look them in the eye and you tell that venue manager, this is what I think we should do. That level of trust is increased, but at that point, you're either paying someone, and it's not a lot, but you're going it's an outlay, or you're relying on someone that you don't know that says, I'll come and do this for free, and you don't know what their background is. Maybe they took Skywarn training and they labeled themselves a meteorologist because they went through the Skywarn class for an hour. But honestly, I think that's a potential career field, especially if you can travel. If you travel on weekends and line up some of these things and say, we'll come support you for a couple $100. I don't know what price point you do at, but low enough so they'll do it, but high enough that it's worth your time. I honestly think that's going to be a big area. The national NCS4, and I can't think of their name now, but they make recommendations for Division I schools, and they this summer put out a best practices guide that says there should be a meteorologist on site at every NCAA Division I football or outdoor venue event. And this is, again, I think it's a potential new career field for people that are thinking get in with the right crowd.
But in terms of cost, you mentioned low cost, and you have a little bit of experience with the insurance. How much is there any benefits of having someone like a lower insurance cost rate or anything like that?
I've not heard of that. I mean, that's another great way to approach this with the insurance company industry, and I really don't know how to get into tap with that. But if we could, talk to a couple of the bigger insurers. You're giving me some business ideas that I'm writing down actually as we do this. If we talk to some bigger insurers and say, hey, we'll come out, throw us $1,000, and I'll come sit with you guys for the night, and you guys take $900 off their premium, or I don't know how that works, but no, I think that's a very good idea, is to get with their insurance companies and say, here's the pack, here's the stuff we can do. We'll go monitor your events. The problem is, as I said, right now that if you're at a county fair, how are you going to get a meteorologist on site? How are you going to know where to start looking? If your local TV guy can't do it because he's doing a school talk that night, how do you get someone in? And that's why I think there's another industry right now. The only option are those apps or a vendor, which is the vendors are very expensive, and you don't have that local trust. But if you're going to do it on your own, you're not going to fly to Kimball, Oregon, and then back to Tennessee or Texas for $400 a gig. So it's just, I think it's availability is more the bigger thing right now.
And it really kind of spells, an opportunity for a lot of the local meteorologists in the area. I've contacted a few people before, and I know, some other people have always, for lack of a better term, complained on Twitter, after an event happens and they don't expect the weather to occur. And it's really an opportunity perhaps for us to reach out, because they're kind of in that mode or that nature where they're still in shock. And it's like, like when the construction companies come in right after a big storm and are like, hey, you want to work with me to repair your home? It's almost an opportunity for something like that in the weather industry.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, that's a good way to tap into those things. We've dealt with it. We had an incident locally here where an event hosted at Michigan Speedway had to be evacuated, and evacuation was horrible. The next thing I did the next day was call the people in charge and said, hey, you needed someone from weather on site, and I kind of left it at that. But I think that might be the next way, is to come up with some sort of business plan, how you would tackle that, You'd want to look at personal liability insurance probably on your own, because if you say something that goes wrong, you're going to get sued too. I'm writing down more things as I talk here. I'll give you guys a cut.
Or VRQ.
Making me think. No, I think you're totally on board with ways to get in with people, and even if it's just maybe it's the first time you say, hey, next time you do this event, I'll come in and do it for free, and I'll come sit with you for 3 hours, because at the very least, when I do the ones down in Hillsdale, I'm not getting a lot of money, but I get a nice country night concert. So at the very least, you go down and you do it for free once, and if they really like you, then say next year you charge whatever, and we'll come down and we'll provide support. And that's why, and I don't want to say cross-train you, but get involved with the emergency management side. If you take some of the online incident command system courses, then you're getting familiar with command lingo and things that actually could apply in a disaster. So if something happens, you have to evacuate, and you're familiar with evacuation procedures, then maybe you added a little another notch on your hat there. So I think you're onto something, and I love that idea.
That's a very good point, because when I used to work with City of Charlotte Emergency Management, we would sit in their Mobile Operations Command for all the Panthers games and do kind of weather support for them, and they recommended we do the ICS 100, 200, and all the way up to 400 possible courses, because you kind of understand, and they used to send us the plans they had in place, plan of the day, and it would list out all those things, who the incident commander is, who the next down is, logistical, and everyone else. And so it's really nice to have that, kind of information at your side.
Yeah, the Weather Service is actually requiring their meteorologists to do basic ICS training, because their goal is to put someone in an emergency operations center during the big events. If it's good enough for them, and it's not complicated, it's not long, but at least you get familiar with the terms about logistics chief and an admin section planner and things of that nature. So I think you just have to get another notch in your cap.
I think Kit has a comment, or Scotty?
I have one. It's kind of I think Kits want to talk about evacuations. I want to ask you this, because you've been mentioning it a couple of times. How has the invention of the weather app, various apps we all know they're out there, how has that kind of hurt the probability of having an emergency manager or someone like a private weather company to go out there? It's frustrating because we know how those apps work, but how hard is it to convince the organizer or the event planner, hey, you really need me over this app?
The best way I could put this is my wife was running in a race, and she asked me what the forecast was the night before, and I said it's going to be dry, and she said, well, my app says there's a chance of rain. And then she woke up the next morning, she said, what's the forecast? I said, it's still dry, and she said, well, my app still says it's a chance of rain, what's wrong with it? I said, well, why are you even asking me that if you're going to believe that? I mean, it really, that's back to the something bad's going to have to happen. Someone's going to have to be looking at their app and say, oh, we're fine, and then something bad's going to happen to show them that looking at the green colors is not, or looking at the smoothed over 15-minute-old radar image is not good enough for you. And back to the education effort. I blogged about crap apps, not to the level that James Spann has, but the more we let people know, I hope. The problem is, though, is then people say, well, what app do you recommend? Well, the one that has the human forecaster, and unless you're watching my Facebook page, I don't have the Rob Dale app. I don't have the ability to do that. When people are traveling, they say, what app should I put? Well, I got to send them to an automated app, because there is no human forecast app that takes them from here to Florida or wherever they're going. So, but there's no market for that. You can't dedicate a team of meteorologists to do a national man-made forecast for free for 99 cents. I mean, that's the problem. So we just have to educate people that the app is cute, but when it comes to life and death or money, then you need to have someone sitting right there with you that says, here's what I think.
Yeah, and sorry, Ricky, I've ran into that earlier this year. We were doing a high school graduation back in June with McDowell County in emergency management. We're partnered with those guys, and they bring us in any big event. And here we are. It's June the 10th. summertime thunderstorms in western North Carolina, and you're telling the principal, hey, you may want to hold off start of graduation for about 30 minutes. We're watching this storm that's a couple of miles away. I don't think it's directly going to hit us, but we all know lightning can strike well without a storm, so let's play it safe. And the guy looks at me, he says, well, that's not what my app says, and I'm going on with the show. Well, he gets 3 or 4 words into it and hears thunder, and I'm smirking, I'm laughing, but it's so hard to convince these people that, yeah, the app is good for telling you the temperature, but that's about it. And I found it so hard to convince people that the human element is a lot better than your app. So that was my little rant for the night.
No, that's great. That makes total sense.
Kid, I think you wanted to pose a new question, so go ahead, buddy.
Sorry, Kid. If I can jump in real quickly here, because it kind of plays off that. Rob, what would you tell people like that when they say, my app is better than a meteorologist?
Well, then, that's just an educational effort just to explain them the differences and what an app's really doing and what it's coming from and where the data source is, and that you basically want to touch on there's no human in between the raw computer data and here. So if it's kind of like saying just hook yourself up to the heart monitor and just let the machine tell you what to do. I mean, if there's no human element, it might be right. It certainly could. If you want to know temperatures tomorrow, the average of Moss is probably going to be the human all the time. But when it comes at life and death decision, do you really want to put your faith in something that you didn't pay for? You just have to pay for by looking at some ads of bingo games. Now, really, are you going to put your life in the line of something that at worst, at best, is 99 cents?
Mm-hmm. Good point. Kit, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're fine. Mine was more about what you started talking about earlier, Rob. I think you were talking about the Michigan Raceway, just the evacuation policies. How good are those across events like these and smaller events where they don't necessarily have major policies in place? What can be done to enforce more knowledge about these types of events that require an evacuation?
Yeah, what happened at this one? This was a concert series put on at Michigan International Speedway, so it was not an MIS event. It was not related to NASCAR. Just used that. They had lightning. It was lightning approaching the storm. They actually had a severe thunderstorm warning west of them. The severe storm died. The storm itself kept approaching, though. So they told everyone they're closing down the concert, evacuate. The campsite was about 4 miles away from the stadium, and then they shut down the buses that transfer people from the campsite to the stadium. So they told everyone, we're shutting down, go find a safe place somewhere. But all the buildings were locked because it was not an NASCAR event, so they have no buildings to get into. All that meant is they stood outside in the rain instead of stood outside in the rain listening to the concert was all it did. Nothing happened. I got a lot of nasty letters the next day asking how this could happen, and someone wrote their legislator and said this should be a requirement that they have plans, and of course it should be, but we're in an era where politics are not going to add additional regulations to anyone just because of the way that's at. So, we're finding the big events have things at least in control. That particular place, though, MIS, it's in the middle of nowhere. So if the big one's coming, there's one 2-lane road that turns into a 4-lane road that's not going to get 100,000 people out of there in a hurry. And that goes back to the personal responsibility side that, if there's a moderate risk of severe weather, are you even going to go to the race that day? And people still say yes because it probably won't happen to me. And, that's human nature. I don't know that there's ever a way to fix that until NASCAR or MLB or whoever says, there's a risk of severe weather, we're not going to play the game at all tonight. And in the era where one missed game means millions of dollars of missed profit, it's just tough. It's tough to do.
So how can we get the information about the evacuation plan of the venue out to the public?
That should be public information. There are some places that put them online. Michigan State University, if there's a storm threat that day, they do pre-publish that on their website. Iowa State, I saw an incident where during on a moderate risk day, everyone that came into the stadium got a little brochure that said, here's where you're going to evacuate. And they actually did evacuate for a tornado warning. but everyone had that little piece of paper that said, here's where you're going to go. So that's, again, a proactive planner side of making sure that information is spread out. It's also, again, a personal responsibility when you go into that, look for signs that say evacuation route, or contact the facility before you go. Go to their website, send them a note, say, if I'm there and bad weather hits, where are you sending me and how am I getting there? Because in some cases, there just may be no good place to go. I mean, honestly, if you're 100,000 people in the middle of that's in a very rural area of Michigan, there's nowhere for them to go. And it's hard for a facility to put that on their website, that if the bad one comes, you're out of luck, because that's just the way life is. So,
Joey, I think I cut you off a moment ago.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm used to it. Anyway, Rob, my only question was, now I know you've got experience with, say, Michigan International Speedway, and of course that's different than a lot of other places. But in general, can you give us a general idea of how long it would take to actually evacuate a facility like Michigan International Speedway? Like, what kind of time frame are we talking about?
To get people out really doesn't take that long. To get them out of the facility, that's maybe 15, 20 minutes. But what they do with them after that is the tough part. I will speak. We evacuated Michigan State University's football stadium. That seats about 70,000. We did that twice last year for lightning, and it went fairly well. But there's a lot of buildings nearby, and everyone's got their car nearby. So a lot of that depends on what's around you. So it took us about 15 minutes to evacuate MSU, to get people into their cars, because it was just lightning. So all we had to do is get them in the cars or get them in some other building. If it's a tornado, I mean, there's no way we're evacuating 100,000 people out of an area in a timely fashion. It's just not going to happen. I mean, any event you've been to where you leave and, if you park too close to the stadium that you're going to be sitting in traffic for an hour, well, throw a thunderstorm and a tornado into there, and your hour's going to be several hours if you're not dead when the tornado comes through.
Okay, the reason why I was asking that was I'd heard other people say, that part of the issue was with storms coming, not, they're on top of us before we have time to evacuate, and just other things like that. And obviously, when it comes to lightning, there's no excuse not to be able to get 70,000 people to safety.
No, there should be that's very easily done. When you see those MLB games with people still in the stands, there's no reason that should be happening. That kind of, the tornado, I'll give you, it's going to be hard, or derecho, whatever, that's going to be a tough one. But lightning coming in, that's a gimme. That's really easy to do. In MSU, we stretched out. I think the limit is 6 is what you have to start when you're 8 or 10. We do 12 to 14 miles just to give us a couple extra minutes. But again, 15, 20 minutes, and that stadium is empty, and people are back at their cars or in the building.
So how much does it come down to personal responsibility still, Rob? And we always hear it after events, safety is your responsibility. But how much, from your standpoint of working with these events, does that actually play into effect?
Well, the problem is people are not going to take that responsibility as long as the event is still going on. If the race is still racing, you may know where you're going to go, but you're still questioning, okay, they're still going, they're still doing the race, so it must not be that bad, because they know I'm up here in the stands, and vice versa. There's so many events where it's easy to say it's a personal responsibility, but at the same time, when you let 100,000 people into your stadium, it's your responsibility too. I mean, it's you as the event planner. Those people are your responsibility. You brought them in, they paid you, and you have a responsibility to shut down whatever it is, because that race is not worth a life. The concert series is not worth a life, and that's I say it's personal, because if you get that we got an alert on your phone that there's a tornado warning, I'm not waiting for that race to stop to get out of there. But if it's lightning and you see it off in the distance and they're not doing anything, well, in your mind, you're saying it's not that bad, because they take care of me. They tell me if it was going to be bad, and they're not doing that. And I think social media is helping the cause. As much as we don't like apps and we don't like social meteorologists, I think social media people posting those pictures and saying, hey, why are we still playing? And I think that will help the cause over time.
Can I say preach, brother, preach?
Bring it on.
Here's my question. Let's kind of go. You said you're very involved with Michigan State. Let's go into Rob Dale. I'm an event coordinator. I want Rob Dale to come in and talk to me about what I need to do, what I need to be looking for. Kind of give us an idea of what you do, what your job is with these event planners, what some ideas they should have as they get ready to prepare their event, maybe for the possibility of severe weather.
Yeah, so what they know how to evacuate. Everyone that has a big stadium knows how to get people out. They've had to do that in a lot of cases after 2001. They had to do that in case there was a terrorism event. So that's kind of the requirement is already. They know how to get people out of the stadium. So the next step is, okay, let's still consider terrorism. Let's still consider the bad thing, but the more likely thing is there's going to be lightning. So what kind of time frame does it take to get people out? And then as a meteorologist, we say, okay, well, even though the law or the NCAA says it's 6 miles, we want to do 10 miles because it's going to take you X amount of minutes. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm saying, how long does it take to get people out of your facility and into a safer area for lightning? And then that helps me with that. If I'm at a county fair, I'm looking at the rock climbing walls and the tents, and I'm saying, what wind speeds are those good for? What we found out since asking that is a lot of people don't know. A lot of the tent installers, installation crews say we don't know what those wind speeds are good for. So that's been a big issue, is if we don't know what wind speeds are at the tents, it could be 30, it might be 80, or not 80. But the point is we need to know where your concern is as an event planner. What's the problem? If it's torrential rains because you're on a grass surface and it's going to flood and people are going to slip and fall, then we need to know how much rain. I mean, so basically, as putting the meteorologist hat on, we come in and say what conditions do you need to be alerted about, and then from the planning side, we help you with those plans if you've not done them already. But otherwise, the role for the proverbial company that we're developing tonight, the goal for that is, okay, what are your alert criteria? If it's 30, then we're going to start telling you when it's 20, so that you're ready when it's 30 miles per hour. If it's so much rain, then we're going to tell you that the storm coming in might drop an inch of rain. I mean, so that it's really a coordination effort. And again, that's why I think in the long run, that in-person meteorologist right there is going to be able to look in the eye and say, we got a half-inch of rain. I don't know, we might get another half-inch out of this next storm. So if 1 inch is your cutoff, trust me on this, we're going to come close. I think that's how our business is growing by the second.
I just got a text from my buddy William, who is the emergency manager I work with in McDowell County. He said, "Why didn't you have me on the show tonight?"
Tell him that's the next show coming.
I'll tell him. I've been trying to get him on the show, so maybe now we can get him. Okay, so that's the outdoor stadium. There's one situation that comes to mind. I can't remember the year, so forgive me of that, but I'm a big SEC fan.
2008.
2008. We had the SEC tournament going on in downtown Atlanta, and they have to stop the game because of a tornado. So we know the precautions outside. What are we going to do with the people inside, the bigger events, the big arenas, concerts, basketball games, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's what the ESPN special that they did 30 for 30. That was a great show on that. That talked about it. But that's again I think we're getting more of that. I think that CDC event was good for indoor venue planners. But if you look at the NCAA requirements, they don't require that basketball stadiums do anything. We had a volleyball match at MSU that had a tornado pass very close to it because they didn't stop because no one was monitoring the weather. And there's no rules from the NCAA that says they have to monitor the weather. So I think it's a little bit easier because you're not worried about lightning, you're not worried about winds, but you're still worried about tornado. And I think that's harder to convince people that they need to have someone monitoring just for tornadoes. I don't get that. And maybe nowadays with wireless emergency alerts, so everyone's cell phone would have gone off for that tornado warning. When you have a stadium with 30,000 people and 20,000 cell phones going out or saying tornado warning, get out of there. Maybe next time around that'll by itself will help. But I think again it's an education effort. It's those indoor venue planners that think we don't need to worry about weather. They already have evacuation plans for terrorism. They already have evacuation plans for hazmat, whatever. This is just the next step. So what are you going to do if there's a tornado as you're approaching? That was in the weird season, right? It wasn't severe weather season, was it? Wasn't it like in the fall or something like that, or in the spring, whatever. My point is that yeah, it's another education issue, getting those indoor guys to realize that tornadoes are still a bad threat.
Yeah, and one thing about tornadoes is it can affect such a small area that it might not even hit the stadium, but it's still like in the area that it could be. It's the could it happen? Like, what do we do if it does? And then it doesn't, and everyone doesn't take it seriously.
Yes, the polygons help. The polygon warnings from the weather service, but that's still, if you're in person and you can look the guy in the eye and you say, you know what, the polygon's too big, we're on the northern edge, it's going to stay south of us, that changes the whole outlook. But then you need to make sure you tell the public, yeah, there's a tornado warning, we're watching. I mean, if you can do that, if you can say we're watching the storm, it's not affecting us, or put something on the big screen that says it's not going to bother us, we're safe here, I think that really changes the outlook, and that adds a level of protection to the public that the people there will respect, as opposed to right now that I don't know if anyone that ever went to that game will ever go to an SEC game. It's SEC, so I suppose you will. But my point is, it brings that trust to the public if you can say we're watching it. Because if you ignore it or you don't say anything, or vice versa, that especially in the day of social media, that's going to show up on Twitter that they were at the event and tornado hit. You know, that was 2008. That was before social media hit. So I think in 2015 that would be a different result in the end, hopefully.
And
All right.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Kit. Go ahead.
No, I was just whatever.
Okay. Well, I was going to say we're getting close to 9 o'clock, and we had about 10 minutes left, so I was going to start trying to wrap stuff up. So if anyone else had any final thoughts or anything, Scotty or Kit, that I interrupted, feel free to throw them in now.
Yeah, I got one. Sorry, Kit. I wrote it down right quick. Rob, you've also done some studies with tornado warning sirens, and you're just talking about the polygons. So that's kind of a good transition to this next topic. Not really too much dealing with outdoor safety, but kind of as well. I mean, if you hear the warning. Talk to us a little bit about that and the way that tornado sirens have evolved for where people used to take them very serious to now they're kind of just, you know, they kind of take them or leave them. You know what I'm talking about. Talk to us about the studies you've done with that. And with us, especially here in the western parts of the Carolinas, we don't have many tornado warning sirens. I know in eastern portions of the Carolinas and Virginia they do. So talk to us a little bit about the studies that you've conducted with that.
Yeah, well, you know, there's no consistency across the country in how the sirens are activated. So it really came to a head in 2011 after Joplin. In Joplin, they tested their sirens at least twice a month. They sounded their sirens for tornado warnings for neighboring counties that did not affect them, or not even moving that way. And on occasion, they sounded their sirens for severe thunderstorm warnings if the emergency manager thought it was a scary storm. So there's two aspects. One, if you've ever looked at the report from the Weather Service, there's a large number of false alarm tornado warnings out of the Springfield office for their county. So they had 26 warnings in a row with no tornado, plus you're sounding the sirens twice a month for testing, plus you're sounding the sirens for neighboring counties. So people are hearing sirens up the wazoo for nothing. So after the Joplin event, I garnered up two Weather Service meteorologists, two emergency managers, and two broadcast meteorologists, and we put together, we grabbed policies from emergency managers all across the country, kind of came up with some best practices. It doesn't cover all the cases, but we said basically only test it once a month. We still have a community here in Michigan that tests them every day, so the people are completely immune to the sirens. Test them once a month, twice if you really have to. Only sound them for a tornado warning. For a tornado spotted by a reliable spotter, not a public report, but someone that's been trained. Sadly, we have a lot of sheriff tornadoes because if the sheriff calls in a tornado, you're going to sound the sirens, even though they've probably never been to a Skyward class. First tornado warnings for a spotted warning, or we put winds greater than 80 miles per hour. For some reason, that one's got some pushback from some emergency managers. I don't understand why they will sound a siren for an EF0 50-mile-per-hour tornado, but won't sound them for a 100-mile-per-hour derecho. That makes no sense to me. But we're trying to get some consistency. We're seeing some states slowly pick this up. The issue is these are all local sirens, so there's no state control, there's no FEMA control. No one can come in and say you have to do them this way. It's really a public groundswell. There's a big hoorah in the Oklahoma City area earlier this storm season when they were sounding tornado warnings for tornado events well outside of the Oklahoma City area, but they were doing it citywide. And I know there have been some meetings with Rick Smith and the going forward and Meteorologist and Norman to hopefully change that. So it's really a grassroots effort with local EMs to get that out. They're not going away anytime soon for people that have grown up with sirens. I've grown up with them all my life, and the whole adrenaline rush when you hear that siren, it gets your attention. I don't think people ignore them per se. It may be different in places like Missouri and Oklahoma where they do sound them frequently. At least here in Michigan and Ohio and Indiana where they're not infrequent, they do get attention. So we're just trying to have a common playbook so that if you move from one county to the next, we have neighboring counties that test them on different days. I don't get that. Why is the first Friday good for one county, the second Saturday is good for the other? So when I move my house 5 miles, I'm hearing them on a different day. So we're just trying to get a little consistency and a little grassroots effort to get that going.
All right. Kit, do you have anything to throw in there? Or Scotty, any rebuttal to that?
No, go ahead, Kit. I had one other question. So.
Okay.
Earlier, the only thing I was going to say was just how much social media has grown, like you were saying, Rob. And, like, I slightly lost my train of thought, but in events like we were talking about with the SEC game, like, if we put it out on Twitter right now, like, everybody's watching SEC final game. So if they start to see that, they're going to start to see that this venue or this program is looking out for the people, and it might start making them look more towards the meteorological community for that aid in any other outdoor event.
I honestly, in the last 45 minutes, I felt my net income hopefully go up because I really think that's going to be a big area that again, there's no one to fill that gap. The Weather Service does it, but obviously we know they can't do all the events. They're going to do the big ones, but nonetheless, some of those mid and small events that maybe they only give you $100 to come sit there for an hour, but it's $100 you didn't have before. So I think with time that might be a big market to get into.
Well, as a current TV meteorologist who is always not really looking for a second job, but keeping my options open because just like you, I know how the industry works. Interesting method because I've always thought about emergency management and kind of getting into that maybe even side venture because for folks in North Carolina, since we are a Carolina-based group, there's a program at UNC Chapel Hill that is a program that's mainly remote. You have to go to the class usually at the beginning and end of the semester, but they do a lot of emergency management classes, as a remote program. So it's an interesting venture if anyone wants to jump into it, look it up a little bit more online, and find some information about it. So.
Yeah, one thing you might want to do is just get to know the EMs, send them a note and say, hey, I'm a meteorologist. One of your events, if you're doing an exercise, you want me to come sit in with you, or you've had a tornado come through, the Weather Service doesn't do many surveys anymore unless it's really big. Tell them you'll go do a survey the next time 60-mile-per-hour winds come through, and make those connections, and that may work through venues as well. But as I said, I think that's a good connection for meteorologists. I see a lot of more meteorologists dealing in this than I used to, and I think it's a good way to keep the weather community involved with the venue community.
Alrighty, Scotty, I'll throw it to you to wrap everything up.
Yep. I say this. I would get to work with emergency management in McDowell County, and I love every moment of that. And like we were talking about before the show, And I've been texting with William as well. He really wants me to get involved in emergency management, so we'll see how that goes. I'm very interested in that profession and that field because I love weather and I love everything I've been able to do with those guys over there. But my question to you, Rob, is, and I think Kid will probably ask the final question that he always asks, but if I'm a patron to a sporting event or going to this festival or concert, and I know I'm not weather savvy, but I'll listen to the news and stuff like that. If I know a severe weather event is likely, or a tornado watch or something like that, what should our followers, our viewers tonight, if they're weather aware and they know what's going on, what should they look for and what should they do, even if the event location or the facility is not being proactive weather-wise? What can they do weather-wise and be proactive if something like this was to affect them?
Yeah, first thing you're doing is checking the area. If you've been there before and you know what's around, and you say to yourself, what, this is in the middle of nowhere. If the tornado comes, I have nowhere to go except sit in my car. Then you think about not going. I mean, that's number one. If it is somewhere that you're on a campus, they've got buildings, and just make sure you're scoping out where's the nearest building to the exit that I'm going to get out of. So if there is a tornado warning, where am I going to go? You don't want to be doing that on the fly. You'll want to check the websites ahead of time, see if they have any kind of evacuation maps. Just do a search for evac map. Some of them do. Some of them consider it a security risk. I don't understand why they consider that security risks. But check your venue's homepage and see what kind of information you can find. But honestly, think about the importance of it. If it's a high risk day, I don't see why you go regardless. If you really think it's going to be that bad, and then it's just not worth it. It's going to create too much hassle. Plus, if you're weather savvy, you want to be home anyways, watching the storms. But no, if it's a bad enough day, then you just need to consider: am I going to eat that $75 ticket because I don't want to risk my life?
Yeah, because if you're weather savvy and you go, you're going to be looking at radar scope more than you're going to be focusing on what's going on.
Then you're going to be ticked because you don't have any good internet signal because there's 100,000 people, so you get the timeout and you won't be happy. So stay home.
That's right. Go ahead, Kid. I know you're going to wrap it up with our final question.
Well, yeah, I'm doing this sort of for Joey. He was in here earlier. He usually asks all of our guests the same question. I'm going to amend it a little bit. We have a lot of teachers and students who watch our show, and a lot of them might want to get into meteorology. Most of our guests are in meteorology, so they can provide help with that. But some of our guests might also have had like a childhood dream of being a firefighter or some sort of emergency management. What kind of advice would you give to a student or a teacher who has a student wanting to get into meteorology and possibly emergency management as well?
Yeah, looking at emergency management is a neat field to get into. You have to know you have to know a little bit about a lot of things, because I dab in chemicals, hazmat stuff. I dab in evacuation policy. I take a lot of look at social science, warning messages. If anyone's familiar with the Weather Service, it's a bunch of all capital letters when they issue a tornado warning that says things that normal people don't understand. So I, taking a class in some social science, what do people react to? I don't want to call you a jack of all trades, but you really need to know things outside of what we do. And a lot of that does apply to meteorology. So, the social science aspect applies to your TV weatherman. How does he communicate? Well, you can be a phenomenal meteorologist, but be horrible on TV because you can't communicate. So it helps if that ends up being the way you want to go. A big area right now is GIS. So if you can map out where your vulnerable populations are, where's the area of your city where English is the second language, where you need to worry about converting things into Spanish or whatever, what part of your city is vulnerable to floods and has an elderly population that might not be able to get out. So there's a real big push for GIS studies, and that applies to weather. I mean, if you go to the SPC's page, there's GIS ARC files on all sorts of projects, and I asked why they did that, because I never really understood why the SPC outlooks say here are the cities involved that might be in the high risk today. FEMA uses that stuff. They want to know how many people could be affected by tornadoes that day. So I really push people into some kind of GIS slash app development. Stay on the technology side. That applies to EM and it applies to meteorology at the same time. So I think the traditional TV meteorologists, sorry to say this, in 10 years will be gone. I'm not gone. I think it'll be dramatically limited compared to what it is today. In 20 years, maybe 30 years, the TV weatherman might be gone. But I think there's a lot of different areas we talked about tonight, a specialty that gets involved, and I think there's a lot of different areas that might push into meteorology and keep it as a viable field.
Yep, it'll be changing for sure, and I agree with that as just someone in the field now. So.
Yeah, I don't see every market having 3 or 4 TV stations in 20 years. I just don't. Look at the number of people who wait till 11 o'clock to watch TV weather now, and the numbers are never going to go up. And so in the future, I see like one TV market per station. You always have a need for one, but boy, the number of people I see that are 20 that say I cannot wait to watch the news to see what the weather is, just that list is pretty short. When you see kids, even when my last few years on TV, people in high schools never watched the news. They had no idea who I was, and which is different than when I started. When I started, everyone knew the TV guy was coming into class. They were excited because some of it was because of TV, but they really didn't know me. High schoolers did know me back in the 90s. The high schoolers did not know me when I left, and because they didn't watch TV, and that's not going to change.
The only person who gets all the high schoolers is Mark Johnson. If you follow him on Twitter, you'll know what I'm talking about, folks.
Good call.
All righty, Scotty.
All right. Well, Rob, we appreciate you coming on. You are on Twitter, so if you'd like to get out your Twitter name or how our viewers or followers can get in contact with you, we'd love to have that.
Yep, I'm the Rob Dale because Rob Dale is a Christian motorcycle minister in Canada, so I had to add the to mine. And I'm Facebook the same way, facebook.com/therobdale. And links to some of the stuff I've dealt with emergency management, weather service, ask me any questions. Again, I just finished my master's in EM, so through plenty of schooling on that side, I'd be more than happy to help out.
Yeah, and we've posted a few of your posts on our event page for tonight, so you can go view that. And you were talking a little bit earlier about communication and understanding it. And it just popped in my head. Maybe we can do I know we've talked on this topic last year, but it's always good to revisit it as Weather Communication 101 and kind of helping everyone understand what's going on. So hopefully we can get that show booked, and maybe we can get you on as a guest, Rob.
Yeah, and that's big for both in weather and emergency management, because there is a lot of emergency managers that think they say, all I need to do is tell people to get out because there's a hazmat situation and they'll get out. And people don't do that. And you hear people that they get the tornado warning, they don't take cover, and you see the quotes with a bunch of idiots. Well, they're not always idiots. It's the way we talk to people, and it's been ingrained in us that if we just put that bulletin out in all capital letters, people will do what we say, and when you actually look at what they do, they don't do that. So you can either call them idiots, or you can figure out how to talk to people, and I think that's a very big area to come to.
Might be good if I unmute my mic. So yeah, hopefully we'll get that show planned, and maybe we can get you back on as a guest. We enjoyed it. I know a lot of people have been watching on Twitter because a lot of ideas have been floating around. So thanks to everyone who watched tonight, and it's a great show. I learned a lot, and it's pretty cool to dive into your world and see how you go with these organizations and help them be safe during severe weather. So we appreciate you coming on tonight.
Absolutely, good to be here, guys.
Awesome. Well, next week we have Brian Busby on from KMBC out of Kansas City. We're just going to kind of talk weather with him. No particular topic to talk about, so we're going to enjoy having Brian on next week. And the week after that, we're going to have Nor'easters 101 with a few meteorologists up in the Northeast. So we look forward to talking about that. I guess it is October, so it is about nor'easter season start to kick up. So we'll kind of discuss that. And before we know it, we're going to be talking about winter weather with Larry Cosgrove in November, and we're going to be talking about northwest flow snow with our own Ricky Matthews towards the end of October. So some fun shows coming up, and we hope that you will make sure that you tune in and join us. So until then, if you get rain this weekend, thank the Lord for it because we all need it. It's very dry around here. So until then, stay warm, stay dry, and we'll see you next week.
That's all, folks.